My wife slept with supervisor for promotion. Now he lost both his job and family. I am 28. And I recently discovered that my wife, who is also 28, had an affair with her former boss, a 35-year-old man who is married with kids. We have been together for 5 years now, and our firsts in love and life were all done with each other. We've known each other from our very childhood and now live across the street. It used to be 5 steps away after we just moved in together. She has been the only constant in my life since then. Just looking at both of us really shows how much love comes from broken homes. Every day I wonder whether it was we who changed things for the better. No, that is what I tell myself anyway. She had been working from home ever since I got my start doing so as well, but now the missus is back out at work. She as in a field where women are few and far between, and later she could tell me about how her place of employment was very much like a boys' club. The guy she had an affair with, her boss at the time, and now supposedly one of the good ones who watched out for her on job-related matters. It wasn't too long ago at all that the wife got a promotion, and I was absolutely beside myself with joy. She had become a manager now, which meant assuming more duties than before in addition to needing several business trips per year. Her first trip occurred just last week from Wednesday through Friday. Before she left, I told her that cheerleaders at home would give impromptu performances. She told me on the telephone that she was leaving her heart with me. "Take good care of it," she said. That phrase she always uses when we are separated for long periods of time. Earlier this week, she came home from work strangely than usual, and I knew right off something was amiss. She looked very upset indeed, and there was a red mark on her right cheek. My wife is fair-complexioned, so bruises easily, that I asked her what had happened at once, but all she said was "hold me," and then she nestled close to me. It was only after a few minutes that she got up from where she had sat me on the couch and told me what had happened. My whole world. She admitted that she slept with her ex-boss when this business trip took place. For me, it was even difficult to understand at first. It felt as though I were watching someone else's life collapse. Or perhaps she would reveal that the whole thing had been nothing but a giant joke. Actually, I think a dirty prank would have been preferable. I was in a daze and said not one word while she confessed this. Cheating strikes a particularly raw nerve with me, as it does with many people. When my father had an affair, my own family was torn apart. It was I who caught him and told my mother. Even now, my relationship with Dad is strained because he still blames me for destroying the family, never forgiven me. And she knew all of this. She knows too well how my family was wrecked by infidelity, which was enough toffee words for her even to think about letting me go. She even supported me as a teenage boy over this issue, and now she is doing the same. Apparently the matter came up on one occasion when the man's wife discovered it and challenged him and my wife at their own place of work. This turned out to be quite a scene, with employees and customers looking on, partly out of amusement but mostly in sheer astonishment. The woman called my wife white trash and slapped her across the face. After that, some employees stepped up and escorted the woman out of the building. My wife telephoned her elder sister afterward. She needed to tell everything she admitted to her sister, but I just sat there speechless. She said something to me. The only thing I was able to think of asking was just what did happen on that business trip. The other evening, she explained to me she went out drinking with the other team leads and stayed out late as she thought she had to join in for team bonding. As one guest after another left until only she and her former boss were left, he suggested going back to his room for some music. My wife went along with it. He kept on flattering her, saying how lovely she was, and that if he were me, he could not help but caress her. At long last, he kissed her. My wife asserted that she was not thinking properly at the time and allowed him to go right on kissing her until they made love. I just couldn't bear to listen to any more, so I stood up and told her to cut it out. When she reached out to take my hand, I pulled it away and told her not to. She began to cry. She apologized again and again, pleading with me for forgiveness. She said that she felt it was the biggest mistake of her life. She hated herself for it and wished she could undo everything. "I only love you," she kept repeating. "There's nobody else but you." The alcohol had also confused her sense of values. "She really needs to leave," I told her. "Go call your sister to pick you up." She got up, still crying, and endeavored to embrace me. But I moved away from her once more. She kept exhorting me not to do this, suggesting she should quit her job or let me have full access to her telephone, see a psychiatrist. But I couldn't bear it any longer. I told her if she didn't go, I would leave. I didn't even take time to pack a bag, I just walked out of the house. Seizing my arm, she tried to prevent me from departing, and she was still begging for mercy after all that we'd been through. Heartrending in any case to think of her like this, as I left her behind weeping. It was as if my heart were being torn from my chest because I still love her. I loved her more than I ever thought possible to love another person. But she wrecked me. She destroyed everything we had built up together, everything we might have had. Driving to my mother's place, where I am staying now, I do not know how I managed to make the whole journey without breaking down. As soon as I arrived, however, I burst into tears. I don't think my own mother has ever seen me cry, not since I was a little boy anyway. The only person who has ever seen me cry is my wife. When I visited my mother, I simply told her what had happened and tried not to hide anything I couldn't see. She felt the same as I did about it. They've always been close. She treated my wife as though she were her own child. She left judgment to someone else and only told me that she was welcome in her house for as long as it took me to get set up again. After I left, my wife has been constantly calling and texting me, but I haven't answered. The texts beg me to go home. They beg me to talk to her. They beg me to say where I am, and they beg me not to give up on her. I feel so very lost and hurt. I thought I'd known suffering, but nothing compares to actually living the experience. I never thought my wife could take that approach. I'd always thought the saying, once a cheat, forever a cheat, was true. It would have meant obliterating a relationship. However, I keep wondering whether I should give us another chance, whether to live in counseling, rebuilding the future out of our collective past. I can't help but keep thinking about our history, how much I love her, how we always fitted together so perfectly, and how when I really had noone else, there was always her. This week has been the most agonizing of my life. Nothing seems stable anymore as everything crumbles around me. I am struggling through this alone as my wife, my best friend and greatest source of support, is no longer by my side. Doubt had been growing in my mind, so yesterday I decided to reach out to the other person hurt in all this, hoping she could provide the clarity I so desperately sought. She had no reason to skew the truth or withhold information. I searched for and found her on Facebook, sending a message requesting we talk. She responded swiftly, offering a video call. I agreed to speak with her right away. Even before a word was said, I could see in her eyes she shared my affliction. She told me how after being removed from their work last Monday, she tried contacting me but could not find my information. Apparently, one of the last things she said to my wife was that she intended to tell me everything. As she said this, I recalled my wife rushing home that day and her sister insisting I hear the news directly from her. I asked if she knew more about what truly happened on the work trip, or if it was truly just a one-time mistake, and how she came to discover the deception. What she divulged confirmed my darkest fears. Their relationship had been unfolding long before that trip. She showed documented proof, texts revealing profound emotional infidelity. Sharing her screen with me, I could barely maintain my composure viewing what was exposed. She explained that last January she noticed her husband withdrawing and losing interest. On a few occasions, she saw him messaging my wife purportedly about work, but he hand-waved it as nothing of import. The day before their vacation, when bringing him something left behind at the office, she found him with my wife, standing close in an intimate manner, joking and smiling in a way that seemed flirty. Upon noticing her arrival, they abruptly separated, with my wife appearing panic-stricken while her husband pretended all was well. That was when she knew something untoward transpired between them, though she opted not to immediately confront him, wanting irrefutable evidence he couldn't weasel out of. Following their trip, her husband distanced himself further and dismissed her advances. That night, awaiting his slumber, she inspected his phone. Within his text thread with my wife laid everything intimate exchanges preceding their vacation. It began as emotional infidelity, with AP professing inability to focus at work around my wife's presence. The messages evidenced AP initiating pursuit of my wife, though her lack of rebuttal mattered not. Some texts prior to their trip saw AP disparaging his wife, lamenting her repeated miscarriages. It was revolting how he spoke of her to my wife. Repeatedly, he asserted perhaps needing a woman like my wife. There were Thursday evening drinks, invitation texts to my wife, and morning messages evidently denoting they copulated. My wife thereafter ceased responding. I found myself at a loss, unable to escape the turbulence of the situation. With care not to stir her sleeping children, she maintained a guarded exterior while inner turmoil raged. Though anger simmered just below the surface, confrontation would wait. Humiliation was to be had on her terms and in a public forum. Monday, Light would bring her plan into action, laying bare wrongs for peers and patrons to judge. While intention had built over time, chance alone exposed the damning scene to another wronged wife, and retaliation knew no bounds. Attempts to stem the tide went unheeded as wrath poured forth. Targets broadened beyond the primary culprit to all complicit in betrayal. OBS then explained to me that her husband displayed no remorse after their confrontation, only fury towards her public outburst. I learned from her that AP was terminated the next day after the incident. One of the hardest things she ever had to do was sit her twins down and tell them everything, trying to explain it in a way they could understand. I knew exactly how she felt, remembering my own mother's anguish following my father's betrayal. OBS said this whole ordeal exposed her husband's true colors, and while he pursued another woman, my wife still played a role in their affair, and as a woman, she had no empathy or esteem for my wife. I told her I didn't default her sentiments, that she deserved to feel however she wanted in that moment. She apologized on behalf of her husband's actions. I paused, searching for the right words, then expressed regret over my wife's part in it all. She said we are now stuck in a club together, a club our spouses unwillingly inducted us into against our will. She asked about my wife and I's current situation. I replied that honestly, I didn't have a clue about our future, but that I wasn't staying with her for the time being. She wished me the best going forward, and I did the same for her in return. Before hanging up, we swapped contact information in case either of us ever needed someone who understands to talk to. Every raw emotion I had been feeling only intensified tenfold. I confided in my mother about what I had learned during our discussion, and though she still didn't pass judgment, I could tell she was upset with my wife too. A whirlwind of emotions raged within as I contemplated AP's downfall. A twisted sense of satisfaction emerged that his indiscretions had ravaged his life and health, though such vengeful thoughts brought me no pleasure. Immense guilt weighed upon me as well, for an innocent wife now faced losing her partner while her children's stability crumbled. How their young hearts would ache in the days to come, forced to reconcile all they held dear, disintegrating before them. Against my wife, too, simmered anger for her betrayal had not only destroyed our solemn vows, but jeopardized my well-being. Our intimacy following her return offered no reassurance, as texts from that trip hinted at careless acts leaving me vulnerable to unknown risks. So many lives damaged by reckless actions, and in the wreckage, only more hurt would be found. Now on to the next story, Story 2. Wife confessed to having an affair with my best friend at Thanksgiving dinner at 3:30 a.m., and I am sitting here, pouring my heart out on a throwaway account because everyone I know is on my main. In the still of night, my thoughts race as I process the turmoil of recent events. Yesterday was Thanksgiving. Yet instead of gratitude, I feel only betrayal and despair. The discovery that my wife of many years, who had been my anchor since our teenage years, engaged in an act of infidelity with my closest confidant has left me reeling, shattered to my core. Questions swirl with no answers in sight. How could she violate our sacred vows? What sin did I commit to deserve such a stab in the back from my so-called friend? As the first light of dawn begins to illuminate the gloom, I know only turmoil, yet somehow I must find a way to carry on. To provide some context, my partner and I have been together since our high school days. When I initially met her in 9th grade, she happened to be dating T, my best friend relevant to this anecdote. Back then, T and I were acquaintances, though we weren't particularly close. After encountering her, I swiftly became enamored. I spent all of my freshman year silently hoping that she and T would cease their relationship so I could get an opportunity. Ultimately, they did, and in 10th grade, I befriended her and asked her on a date. Our bond became one of the best things that occurred to me in high school. Her presence got me through what was otherwise a fairly challenging 4 years. Since they were merely freshmen when they dated, T didn't appear too troubled that I was dating his ex, even granting me his permission when I questioned if it was acceptable. By senior year, T and I had become close comrades, and there was no sign that he held any resentment toward me for dating his former girlfriend. The three of us ended up attending the same local state college, where I kept my relationship with my wife strong and maintained a close friendship with T. There were times when it became rather evident that T was still attracted to my wife, like when I caught him gazing at her during gatherings, or when another friend told me that T had confessed he wanted to be intimate with her. While it bothered me, I understood that my wife is very attractive, and it is natural for other guys, including my friends, to be drawn to her. As long as they didn't make a move, I didn't really care. But it was obvious T was very attracted to her. And over the years, he made sly comments about how fortunate I was, and even once joked about the form of her ass. 10 years ago, we were fresh out of college with our whole lives ahead of us. Now I find myself settled with a family of my own, a son, a daughter, and a faithful wife at my side. Meanwhile, my old friend T has faced tumult, recently divorced and sinking into a deep depression. These past few months have been challenging as I strive to support him emotionally, but my work and own mental struggles leave me overwhelmed. Thankfully, my wife has stepped in where I fall short, listening without judgment as T pours out his troubles. Their bond was never strong in our student days, as my wife disapproved of T's womanizing ways. Yet her compassion seems to have mended old fences, and I note their changed demeanor when together her rapt attention to his tales, her laughter encouraging more, her queries as to when next they may meet. Her kindness heartens me, though an unease also stirs, one I dare not speak for fear of seeming a jealous husband. For now it eases my mind that in his lonely state, T has found an ear in her caring company. The evening had taken an unexpected turn of events. What started as a casual conversation over dinner had evolved into a heated argument about their financial struggles. Frustrations were running high as money had become a constant source of stress lately. As voices escalated, she abruptly stood up from the table and stormed out the front door, refusing to engage any further. He sat alone with unanswered questions swirling in his mind. Hours passed without word from her as darkness fell. Just when worry began to set in, the door creaked open and her disheveled form appeared in the doorway. Silence hung thickly in the air between them as questioning eyes met but found no explanation. Though itching for answers, he said nothing, too drained from the volatile exchange to delve further tonight. Some distance seemed needed to allow tempers to cool before hashing out where to go from here. Now, fast forward to fall harvest time. My entire extended family had gathered, along with some close friends who I had not conversed with for over a month. The feast was progressing pleasantly until an individual broached politics. T and I view the political realm in utterly opposing manners. He staunchly champions the incumbent head of state, whereas I embrace more liberal principles. Let us avoid politically charged discussions here, if agreeable. Typically, we steered clear of such topics, yet on that occasion, T insisted on debating at length. Tempers flared rapidly, and remarks turned uncivil, with T bellowing that my progressive stance denoted cowardice and a failure of my manhood. I inquired from where such an accusation originated, and he retorted that I seemingly could not satisfy my wife's intimate needs. The assemblage fell deathly still. My spouse and I never disclosed particulars of our relationship publicly, rendering me wholly shocked. The remainder of the meal proceeded in palpably awkward silence. The evening was winding down as guests started to disperse, leaving just the three of us behind. My friend and wife exchanged a look as I requested we speak, an unspoken secret weighing heavy in the air. Without prevarication, T met my gaze and revealed what transpired between them on that fateful day of our dispute. Words of intimacy were uttered under the guise of solace, walls crumbling as comfort turned carnal. Though my wife attempted protest at first, acknowledging the wrong, she eventually acquiesced to his advance. Their indiscretion was consummated, a betrayal that stole my breath away. Silence fell as I struggled to find speech, reeling from the revelation. After minutes elapsed without response, T took his leave, departing swiftly and without farewell. Alone now with the woman who vowed her faithfulness, tears welled as she conceded it was the gravest of mistakes. Explanations tumbled from her lips of late, the stresses of our lives wearing heavily upon her, leaving vulnerability that another filled with attention and flirtation. Though denying intent, she acknowledged allowing his implications to plant seeds of want, craving the diversion he provided in my absence. In a moment of weakness after our quarrel, weakness turned to wrongdoing. Commanding her hence, I withdrew to collect turbulent thoughts, not yet ready to comprehend how deeply the foundations we built had cracked. Refusing to relent, she followed to continue lament, but each time her pleas arose afresh, I shattered them with shouts for her to retreat, space the solitary balm I could bear in the aftermath of her misdeed. Now, as I sit here writing this, I find myself utterly crushed under the weight of despair. The mental image of my beloved in the arms of another shreds my soul like nothing ever has before. While every fiber of my being cries out to remain by her side as she is the very air I breathe, yet clouds of doubt shroud my mind. Can I truly believe their intimacy occurred just the once, a solitary slip born of stress alone? Or was it but the first of more to come, with lies yet to follow in its wake? I want nothing more than to preserve what we have built together these years, yet I flounder, waves of confusion tossing me upon uncertain seas. Kind souls, please lend me your counsel. How does one navigate waters so treacherous yet crucial to cross?